everyone. We're just letting everyone come in from the waiting room, and we'll get started in just a moment. Like we have a lot of people joining us this morning. Thank you all for spending your Saturday with us. We appreciate the level of interest in this wonderful seminar. Today we're going to be talking about how to research the history of your home. I'm Kirsten Faulkner, the Executive Director of Historic Hawaii Foundation. And this session is part of a series that we're doing on preservation and practice with an emphasis on Hawaii. You can see some of our previous presentations in this series on our website, which is historichawaii.org, and also on the Historic Hawaii YouTube channel. So if you have an interest in preservation and practice and other topics, please be sure to check that out. So, looks like we have some good people here. So we'll go ahead and get started. Before we get into the topic today, I did want to go over a few housekeeping items. As I mentioned earlier, we are recording this session and it will be posted to the Historic Hawaii website and YouTube channel. So we're doing this as a meeting today rather than as a webinar because we wanted to have the opportunity for our breakout rooms and other engagement. But that does mean your image, name, and voice may be captured as part of this recording. So we just ask you to be mindful about that and obviously keep your video and your audio muted until we get into the breakout rooms for discussion. So that'll really help everyone be able to focus and not get distracted by background noise or people being off of mute. We do have closed captioning that's available. There's a button on your screen that you can toggle that on or off. We're using a voice to text technology, and some words might not be captured completely accurately. So I apologize if it gets a little bit quirky. We'll try to correct that in the recording, but just to have that service available if that is helpful to you. There's also a chat box that you can use to enter questions, either for the speakers or for other participants, and our staff will be monitoring those and try to get back to you and so forth. And then after our panel discussion, if you choose to, you obviously don't have to, but if you want to stay for smaller group discussions, we're going to be having breakout rooms where our panelists and our staff members will be available to have more of a Q&A and discussion, not only with the experts, but with each other as well. So when we get to that point in our session today, there will be a pop-up box that says join room, and you just have to hit the button that lets you join a room. So we'll go over that a little bit later as well. So after housekeeping out of the way, I'll just note, again, I'm Kirsten Faulkner. I'm the Executive Director of Historic Hawaii Foundation, which is a statewide nonprofit organization that is dedicated to helping people save Hawaii's historic places. We were founded in 1974, so we're coming up on almost 50 years. And we love being able to work with our communities on advocacy, assistance, protection, and education activities. So later on, our staff members will be helping out with those breakout rooms. So today we have Andrea Nandoskar, our Education Program Manager, Beth Iwata, our Director of Development, Michelle Kisvick, our Development Assistant, and Virginia Murrison, who is our Contracted Preservation Architect. This series of preservation trainings is also supported by the National Park Service. I think most people know them as obviously the caretakers and stewards of national parks, monuments, trails, and memorials, but they also have an entire segment of the Park Service that is dedicated to heritage protection efforts, not only in the park system, but also in communities throughout the country. So we're very fortunate to be working with our regional office and through their preservation partnerships and history program, and really appreciate the support and expertise that's been provided through that partnership. This particular program is also supported by an education grant from Mālama Mānoa. Mālama Mānoa is another nonprofit organization that is focused on historic Manoa Valley on the island of Oahu. And they provide education grants to support all kinds of great activities. And so we truly appreciate the opportunity to partner with them and also the good work they do to preserve and protect the special qualities of Manoa Valley. So thank you to them. So about this course, this training is to provide an overview on research approaches, methodology, sources for finding the history of a home. While we're going to be focused on residential, some of these techniques and information are also relevant for other kinds of historic research. So you may be able to find some things for other types of properties, commercial properties or agricultural or whatever. We're not focused on archaeology or pre-contact history today. We talked about doing that, and our agenda just got really too full for us to be able to add that. But if that is a topic you're interested in, please note that in the survey or questionnaire at the end of the training, because if there's enough interest, we would look into doing a follow-up session that focuses on kind of the non-built environment or the pre-contact history of a place. So this workshop is appropriate for those who may want to develop the research into a nomination for listing property on the historic register, but also just for those who are interested to document it or to discover the history for personal satisfaction or to share your stories with family and friends. So we're not focused necessarily on how to complete a National Register nomination form. This is more about how do you find the information that might eventually end up in one of those forms. So we're going to focus on the methodology, how do you get organized, how do you track results, where do you look for sources, and how to synthesize some of that information into a useful format. We're planning on taking about 2 hours. The first 40 minutes or so will be our panel presentation. Then we're going to look at an example and see how some of these concepts get applied to a specific project. And after that, we'll have about 30 minutes in these breakout rooms for smaller group discussion. And so if you do have questions or a project that you're working on or something you'd like to get some feedback on, you can bring that into the small groups and see what the peer groups and our subject matter experts have in the way of guidance and advice. Obviously, we can't do it for you. This is a do-it-yourself kind of workshop, but we want to be able to answer questions that will be most useful for all of you. With that, I'm going to introduce our panel. Our moderator is Dr. Elaine Jackson-Rotondo. She is the director of the National Park Service Regional Preservation Partnerships and History Program, and she is based in San Francisco. Dr. Jackson-Rotondo earned her doctorate in architectural history and a master's of architecture from the University of California, Berkeley, and a bachelor of architecture from the University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana. And she's worked for the National Park Service for about 20 years. We are also delighted to welcome 4 subject matter experts to our panel discussion. We have Allison Chu, who's an associate at Fung Associates, Inc., Don Hibbard, who's an architectural historian, author, and consultant, Kate Stevens, who's a senior associate and historic architect at Architects Hawaii, AHL, and she is also currently chair of the Hawaii Historic Places Review Board, and Polly Tice, who is principal and director of research at Mason Architects. So welcome to all of you. Oh, I will also note that later on we have a couple more experts who will be helping with our example and some of our breakout rooms. So they include Angie Westfall from Mason, McKenna Furuta from Fung, and Tonya Moy, also from Fung Associates. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Jackson-Rotondo.
Good morning, aloha. Thank you for giving us your time this morning. And, today we're really fortunate to have an excellent panel of experts with decades of experience researching and documenting historic properties. And through a question and answer session, they will provide information that will be helpful for anyone who might be interested in researching the history of their home. And we're going to start with a general question that Kirsten touched on a bit in her introduction, and that is, why research the history of your home? And Polly, would you like to answer that question? You're on mute. There you go.
Sure. Hi, sorry about that. Hi, everyone. Yes, as Kirsten mentioned earlier, some of the reasons that you'd want to research your home is personal. Probably the most common that we work with is, of course, when people want to list their properties on the historic register, either the Hawaii Register or the National Register. But obviously you might also have personal reasons. You might be interested in the history of your neighborhood for some other reason. You might want to collect information to record for your family, for your kids or your grandchildren. You might be interested in something that happened on the land previously before you lived there or before your home was built. So I think there's a lot of different reasons that we hope maybe in the breakout rooms to hear more from you of why you're researching yours, but ultimately it's personal. And for us, it's usually we're preparing for nominations, and that's how we do it. Another reason might be you're doing a renovation to your home and you might need technical information, and that kind of thing. I don't know if anyone else has comments to share on the panel.
Yeah, are there any of the other panelists want to add to Polly's excellent answer?
Katie.
Yeah, I was thinking when if you're considering doing a renovation to your home, you might want to find out more about what part of it was original, when things were added, and you might even find out why they were added. And it might affect the decisions that you make when you're going to make renovations. You might decide to keep a part of the house that you're considering removing, or maybe enlarge something that you weren't considering keeping, or it might change the way that you think about the home.
Great, and I believe that was Katie speaking, correct? Thank you. Any of the other panelists? Great. I will go to another question, which is, what are the types of information that people might need to start their research? Allison, do you want to take that one?
Hi, sure. Good morning, everybody. And apologies for my voice. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, but luckily this is a virtual webinar. So still happy to be able to attend with this wonderful panel and HHF. But in order to start, you've got you've obviously got your house and your address, which is going to be really the most basic critical piece of information to start. It's going to allow you to find your TMK, your tax map parcel from city and county websites. You can then use that information. If you don't already know the year built date for your house, it'll allow you to search through those resources to find that, or to kind of get at least a sense of the construction date. It will sometimes the plat and parcel maps will also give you previous owner information. You can then look for other maps through Bureau of Conveyances. You can do newspaper searches with historic newspapers. It will really give you an avenue to get started with the rest of your research.
Great, thank you, Allison. Do any of the other panelists want to add to Allison's answer?
I'd just like to say, yeah, I think what Allison's saying is accurate, that the best place to start is probably at the tax office, because they do have what are called field books. They're all online. And as long as you know your property's tax map key, which you can also get from the tax office, you can then look to see what the field book contains as far as information. And usually the field book will trace the ownership of the property back at least to the 1950s, maybe a little earlier. But they'll also provide you with the land documents where the deed is recorded, so that you can then go to the Bureau of Conveyances and research back further. While this may not tell you who built your house, at least it'll tell you who is owning the property. And you can trace that back all the way to the Mahele.
Great, thank you so much, Don. The next question is related, and it's more kind of like, okay, we know what the types of information you might need to start your research, but I think often people want to know, but how do I start? Where do I start? do you recommend, developing a plan or strategy? Dawn, do you want to continue and answer that question?
No, I don't usually develop a big plan. My plan is start at the tax office. And then as you start to gather more information, then you can start to move forward. But usually, yes, I'll go to the Bureau of Conveyances. And then I may go to the, depending on what I find at the Bureau, quite often at the Bureau, there'll be deeds recording mortgages. And so you'll get a sense of, oh, they took out a mortgage, these owners probably took out a mortgage to build a house. So that might be a good place to start looking. Then I might go to the public library. They have the city directories for this, the state. And you can look up the different owners' names, see if they're living at your address or not. So that'll confirm if they're living there, chances are the house was built. And so that way, and then from there, once you have the owner's name or who you think the builder was, it's very useful probably to go to newspapers.com and start looking up that name and seeing what pops up in the newspapers, the old newspapers. So that's sort of a strategy. And then it depends what you see in the newspapers. It could take you in a totally different direction. And so I think it's a progressive process where you get certain information and you can build on that information and look for other information.
Great. Would any of the other panelists like to add to Dawn's answer? It's pretty thorough. Polly?
Yeah, I just wanted to say for the identifying who is living in the home can also be found through phone books. And they wouldn't necessarily be the people who owned the home, but they were the people that lived in the home. And that's a different part, right? Because they could have separate renters, but sometimes you want to know about them too. And so the phone books at the state library can be used to reference for that.
Great, thank you. Our next question is also closely related, and it's about, where to find information about not only your property, but the neighborhood, whether you are looking for, as Dawn mentioned, maybe who designed it or constructed the home, but it's also the property and the neighborhood. Katie, do you want to answer that question?
Sure. One place to look is to try to figure out if any other homes or buildings in your neighborhood have been nominated to the historic register, or maybe there's some type of a HABS documentation, or they were subject of some other study. So you could find information about your neighborhood in sort of the historical section of that document, and also look at the sources that are listed for that document, because sometimes that will lead you into other places. Also in the newspapers, I think all of us that are researchers are just so happy about this website called newspapers.com, because we used to go to the library and have to look up things on little cards that somebody had made a note about something in the newspaper. But now newspapers.com it's basically like a Google for newspapers, and you can put in keywords. So you could put in keywords about your neighborhood, the name of the neighborhood, maybe years or something, and the newspaper.com will come up and tell you with different articles that have those words in them. And so you might learn more about your neighborhood that way. Also, neighborhoods like Mānoa in particular have had a lot of research done previously for different reasons. And so there are sort of historical related organizations that can provide you with information about that neighborhood.
Great, Katie, thank you. Katie mentioned HABS, which is the Historic American Building Survey, and those documents are available online as well through the Library of Congress, as are many of the National Register nominations through the National Park Service website. Would anybody else like to add to Katie's answer?
Just to add on to, Katie's notes about newspapers.com. It's such a wonderful and valuable search engine that we use in our office a lot. And what's nice about it too is not only does it have like a date filter, if you're doing historic research, you can really narrow down on you know, a particular era for your house construction or research, but you can also search, you know, if you knew previous owner names. You sometimes have to be a little bit creative in your search terms, like if you are using, you know, street, spelling out the full word versus the abbreviation, but sometimes you'll get different results that pop up with that terminology, and they can, either one can lead you down a path of really helpful research. And then the other thing about it too is I think you do have to sign up for a membership for it, but it's really valuable. It's really helpful, and something that we use quite often. And in addition to that, there is, I think, USGS maps, which is something that's really helpful. They also help you, they have a tool where you can actually pinpoint your location on the map, and then it lets you toggle between the available maps that they have, and it'll kind of show you how the neighborhood has developed over time. So usually what they'll do is they'll pinpoint, you know, some of the major structures like churches or schools and universities. But what it will do is really, it shows you from whatever available maps that they have to the present day, and you can really see a little bit more of that neighborhood context for your research.
Great. Thank you so much. That's very interesting about the
I think
USGS
also,
maps.
excuse me, I think also along this line, there's also fire maps, which the University of Hawaii has online. And they also will actually show you individual buildings. And so you can look at your area and you can see when houses are being constructed, like look at a 1920s versus a 1930s or a 1950s. And you can see the changes that happen in the neighborhood that way as well.
Great, thank you. So we've been talking about a lot of different places to get information, how to start, etc. I'm wondering whether, you know, Polly, you could comment on, you know, recommendations for keeping track of or organizing the research as you gather it. Any advantages of keeping it organized?
Yeah, of course. So I think that it's personal. Every researcher I know does it differently. So there's not a right or a wrong way. I think some of us work towards or organize things based on the deliverable or the end product that we're going to be producing. So that sometimes determines how you structure literally what you're doing in your documents. But obviously you need to create a system of filing and storing your research finds. Most everyone does it on a computer, but I guess people can do it hard copy way too. But obviously you want to label everything in your files with descriptive titles when you're saving things. You want to make sure that you're referencing the date of a historic photo in the file name when you're saving that, so that you can have a quick, easy reference when you're going back to things. But generally, one of the things that I do to get started is when I'm collecting tidbits, you never know which tidbit is the most important one, or sometimes they don't seem like they make any sense at all. It's important to capture everything because sometimes we have a narrative in our head about what happened and the research doesn't back it up and there's a sort of disconnect. But what you have to do is collect it all. And then what I do is I organize it chronologically, like in an actual timeline table with gaps of the eras where there's missing information. So I keep track in a table linearly with a graphic, if that's appropriate, a historic map, say, for a certain era. And then I make sure the source or the citation or the reference of where I got that information is aligned there with that piece, so that you can glance at it and see where your holes are, and then keep going to fill in those holes. So I'm sure everybody has a different way of doing it, but I'm love to hear how other people do it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Paula. And I think that the key on that's, making sure even if it doesn't seem important, where that information came from, because I can think of times when I didn't do that. And then I think I know where I found it. And it takes me longer than I had hoped to try to retrace where I found that piece of information. Do any of the other panelists have suggestions? Okay.
A lot of people are use something like an Excel file or something. Probably most people are used to using that for something, but that's a really good way to organize so that you can have a column that maybe, shows the image, or because you can even stick photo images into an Excel file, and then maybe a list of where it came from and a list in the year. And then you can actually sort things by, say you wanted to sort by the year, maybe you wanted to sort by a source or something. So sometimes that can help so that you have a little bit more flexibility of arranging things and looking back at them.
Great tip. Thank you. Earlier, I think it was in the first answer, Allison mentioned the National Register or register listing. And, why might someone consider nominating their property to the state or National Register? Dawn, do you want to answer that question?
Okay. Well, I find there's several reasons, but probably especially for residents, is the primary reason. Has been the four counties all offer property tax abatements to people whose houses are registered. It's they look at it as, rather than investing in staff and time, that they're investing directly into properties and how to help maintain them and preserve them for the future. So that's a major incentive for people to register their house. Also, some people do it for recognition. I know, like churches and other places, they want to go looking for grants because they want to restore their building. And quite often, when they put in their application, it adds a little more credence that, yes, this is a historic building and it's a registered historic building. So that also adds, I think, to as far as an incentive to register your house. Some people just do it because they think it's going to help preserve their house, because they want the house to live on after they are gone, or they're no longer own the house. And again, there will be certain regulatory functions that will go into effect with especially the Hawaii Register. And so at least the house, if something's going to change radically on it, will at least be reviewed, and the people will be making an informed decision on what they're doing. So those are a few.
Great, thank you, Dawn. Would any of the other panelists like to add to Dawn's answer?
So in Hawaii, if your house is listed on the historic register, you do have available, you could get tax abatement, as Dawn mentioned. I think each state is a little different in what they decide to do or how they decide to provide assistance. Some states, instead of that, will give you back money, or it's actually through a tax credit. If your house is listed on the register and you decide to do some sort of a restoration project or repair project, you can get some tax abatement in next year for a certain portion of the cost for doing that. So they have that program here for commercial buildings, I believe, but other states will offer that for residential properties as well. I think they're encouraging people to maintain the house and to do restoration projects, so they'll help you with the money.
Great, thank you. What are, as we are talking about the different resources that are available to, research a property, what are some unexpected sources of information for researching a property that our panelists have come across? Maybe Katie and Allison, if you'd like to answer that question. We'll start with Katie.
Sure. I find that different aspects of social media often is really helpful. Photographs, if there's places like Pinterest and other websites like that where people post up images, and you can, if you've got little keywords, you can search like in Mānoa or something, and you can find things there. I mean, you probably end up sorting through a lot of things, but then a lot of times it's interesting as well. I found another one was, it's a Facebook page and it's called Remember Oahu from the Past. And they actually have this for each one of the islands in Hawaii. And I think there's so many on Oahu, they actually have Remember Oahu from the Past #2. But people will post up memories, and then people will add in the chat to that other images and things, but they have a search engine there. So you could type in something related to your home, maybe your street name, or maybe the architect's name or the family name. Actually, we were at a historic registered meeting one time, and somebody on the board asked the presenter a question about a building because there had been a change done to it. And they said, when do you think that happened? And they hadn't found that in the research. So during a break, I just pulled up that Remember Oahu from the Past, and I typed in the street name. It was in downtown Honolulu, and just was looking through the images, and I found a picture of the building during that time period that was in question. So, again, it can be sort of a rabbit hole. It can lead you into a lot of things, but sometimes that's how you find new information you didn't expect as well. So I think social media is a good place to look.
I agree with Katie on that. I think because social media is it's such a visual medium and everybody's on it these days. There is a lot of information out there, and sometimes you obviously have to sift through a lot of it, but sometimes the finds can be really surprising and really useful. So I think some of it is just, keeping an open mind about the information that you come across, as well as being able to obviously fact check and document the sources to know where you're getting them from if you do need to go back to it. Along that similar note, I've seen a lot of historians posting on Instagram, and they'll document houses or document other buildings in cities across the U.S. And they'll often have a lot of really interesting and accurate information about each of the buildings. So that can also be very useful.
Great, thank you, Allison.
And with the internet these days, it just, in a way, you don't even know, it almost seems like there's no limit. You can just go into Google and type in, say, your street number and street name and probably the city. If you put it in quotes, it'll help narrow things down because you're doing a specific link to those words together, but just go right into Google and type that in and see what happens. Sometimes you'll find things that you really didn't expect. So just the ability of things that you can find these days on the internet is pretty amazing.
Polly?
Yeah, one place I found some great information on my house was my next door neighbor. He has lived in the neighborhood since 1960 and had the original neighborhood development plans just sitting in his filing cabinet. And so he brought it over, and I just was shocked and amazed and so excited. And not everybody has a neighbor who has lived there that long, but your neighbors might know. Who knows, that kind of thing. And then, of course, touching upon the social media resources, the neighborhood group like Next Door online, I've seen people post historical information about, say, our neighborhood or other neighborhoods, or they ask about it. And so there are, even I've seen real estate agents provide pretty decent history sections, and you always want to fact check it if there's not citations in it. But it's one place to start. Just ask, does anybody know about the history of our neighborhood? What I learned when I first moved into our neighborhood was that there was an airfield here, and that I had found just through this social media stuff. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I'll relay kind of a personal story. When I was doing some research, when I got a lot of papers from my parents after they passed away, I found a deed from a gentleman who sold our house to my dad. And it was like the day after he had bought it. And I found a Polaroid that was a threatening note telling him that they didn't want people of our kind in that neighborhood and threatened them. And so I started, I started looking into things, and the red line maps that are online made it very clear kind of what had happened was that my father had tried to buy in that area and he was denied, and that area was redlined. And when I grew up, we were the only non-white family in that neighborhood, and it's still all white. And it was through those red line maps that I started to kind of understand a little bit better about how our family ended up there and why our parents were so cautious. And it was pretty interesting. And at that time, I hadn't really looked that much at the red line maps, but they're pretty interesting when you see why certain neighborhood, you can start to see why certain neighborhoods developed the way they did as far as demographics. And so that was another source that I found really helpful in just understanding my own kind of personal history of the home that I grew up in. Do any of the other panelists have any tips or things that they found serendipitously?
I was researching a house in Hawaii, and there was another house on the road that was the same floor plan. And so I went over and was going to ask the people if I could look at it just to see if it was still the same or if other changes had been made. And I ended up talking to the owners, who were quite elderly, but their son came out and started talking to me about the house. And he said that the owners had been there for a long time, and that house was the last house that was built in the neighborhood before the war. And then there was a big long period of time where nothing was built. And then later, probably another decade later, new things started to be built. So he was able to show me sort of where the line was, where the neighborhood had stopped. They had stopped doing construction at that time. And he said that during the war, that soldiers came and kind of took over the park that was there. And it was great. It was just kind of, he happened to be there visiting his parents, and he had retained all this information. So it was, again, like Polly had mentioned, your neighbors or the other person in the neighborhood. But it was great that he was there and that he had an interest in it as well. And he had remembered a lot of things. So that was kind of neat.
That's great. Thank you so much. Those were the questions that we had and for our discussion session. And I think that now I'm turning it back over to Kirsten to go to our case study.
Thank you to all of you. I mean, your experience and depth of knowledge is so impressive, and thank you for just starting us out with this big overview. But we did think it would be helpful to maybe walk through an example and see how some of these research methods and ideas play out in practice. So we decided to pick one that is already on the State Register of Historic Places. And so this full nomination is available. I think the link was put in the chat a little bit earlier. But what I'm going to do is, present some information that came from the write-up, and then we'll talk about where did that information come from and how might someone else find similar information for their own property. So the idea isn't just look at this one house, but to also think about if you're researching your home or you're researching a place, how does this serve as an example? So I do want to acknowledge that the write-up for this was done by Angie Westfall. So she's going to also jump in for some of this discussion since she actually did the work. And Angie's part of Mason Architects. So let me, this one we actually do have pictures because I think pictures are helpful when we look at this. And so let me get to, okay. So the name of this house is the Wren Guest House. It's on Oahu Avenue. So these two paragraphs are the kind of summary description about this particular place. So this is the synthesis of all the research and the information. And when you're going to just describe it in a couple of paragraphs, what did you find? So Wren Guest House on Oahu Avenue is located in the Valley neighborhood of Mānoa, north of Honolulu on the island of Oahu. So, location, where are we? The house is within the Ahupua'a of Waikiki and the Moku of Waikiki. We did not talk about Ahupua'a and Moku, so I do want to come back to that. We can talk about that a little bit. It was constructed in 1939, so when it was built. It's a one-story single-family residence, so just a simple description of what is it. It is an excellent example a 1930s territorial style residence. So sort of laying that groundwork of style and architecture. It combines traditional American residential styles that were prevalent in Manoa during the early part of the 20th century, with the Hawaiian adaptations being popularized by Hawaii's prominent architects of the day. So that starts to set some context around how does this home represent or fit in with a broader context. So I'm going to pause for a moment and ask our panelists to talk about ahupua'a and moku. What do those terms mean and where do you find that information? Okay, I'll call on someone. Polly, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So I think we all know what ahupua'as are, but if we don't, they're the division, the larger division of the location within the island. I don't know how many ahupua'a there are on Oahu, but that's the larger division of land where the property is located. And one good resource for looking that up is the ahamoku.org website. If you want a quick reference, there's other resources online to find that.
Others? Okay, let's go on to the next one. So this is the United States Geographic Service topographic maps. So these, I think, were mentioned earlier as showing the elevations, the longitude, the latitude, where the properties are in relationship to the landscape itself. So again, where do you find these? What do they tell you? How do you read them? Let's see, Katie, let's start with you.
Well, you've listed a good source there online. We probably could find printed maps as well as some locations like the libraries, but this can show you also things in your neighborhood. I think somebody was talking earlier about how there's places that you can look that you pinpoint a location and then you can actually scroll through different years. So this can show you the changes that were happening around and when your building appeared. So the USGS maps are a great source for that kind of information.
Yes, I just want to point out, this is Punchbowl. You can see H1. You can see this density of building types labeled University of Manoa or of Hawaii at Manoa. Maybe some large building footprints, a street pattern, different. These lines show different elevations. So this shows the slopes going up a mountain on this side and up a mountain on this side. So showing this is in a valley and there's mountains on either side. So it starts to show some context there. So are there any comments? I guess, Dawn, do you want to speak to maybe other things you might be able to tell from a USGS map? Dawn, you're muted.
I prefer using fire maps, but these are sort of helpful sometimes in showing the general layout. Mainly, I think they're useful on the nomination just to locate the property where it is.
I just wanted to add one thing. Is that okay? So one resource that you can go to find almost like a snapshot of these early on in your research, and it's free, and you can just to gather information. You're not going to necessarily want to pay for this or purchase these or save them. But if you go to historicareals.com and you type in your address, it'll pop up maybe 5 or 10 either historic aerial photographs or USGS maps, just little pieces, and they have a watermark all across them unless you're paying for it. But it gives you a good sense. It gives you like several years, so you can see 1960 and then 1950, and it just gives you like a good snapshot. And one thing that I saw on this when I was doing some research for a property, it wasn't a residence, but I hadn't been able to see a lot of or find many historic maps. But on the USGS map, right near the resource that we were looking at, it said cemetery. And later maps, the later decade didn't show that. And I didn't have anything earlier, but it was an important piece of information that we needed to know about a wall. So it was good to see it there. And then we could kind of start researching that separately. We didn't know to even look for that back in that period. So historicareals.com, you can grab some good quick information, including it, they populate it with these.
Other maps, you had early on mentioned the address, the tax map key, plat maps, and also information from geographic information systems. So I think early on people were talking about the importance of property records and title searches and the chain of ownership. So where do you find that information and how can you access it besides looking at your tax bill? Or maybe that's where you start, you look at your tax bill. Katie?
There's also the real estate department, the county real estate department. It's located in the old police station downtown. If you go in there, they have a number of real estate related type records where people would come and assess a property to determine how much it's worth, to determine how much tax you have to pay. And they would often draw little outlines of your building and how big they are. And you can look that up with your tax map key number. So that will tell you some information about the building itself and the property. So that's one good place to look. The tax map, you can find those online for each island by going in with your address. I think you've listed online here in the image of where that website is. I can think of what other maps that you can search for. Those are to me, the sort of first ones that I would look for in terms of the maps.
Yeah, sometimes the tax map key is useful, or tax map is useful because you'll find that parcels have been subdivided, and this way you can see, oh, it was once part of a much larger piece of land than what it is now. Also, they're useful because they'll show sometimes lots are consolidated. So maybe the parcel you're looking for, you're looking at the tax map of today, but actually when the house was built, it was on a different tax map number. So you're actually having to go find one of the parcels that have been dropped into the parcel you're in now.
Good point. In fact, this example that we're going through, that's exactly what happened. The size of the lot changed over time, and that becomes clear through some of this research. Angie, I know you're with us too. I don't mean to ignore you. So if you wanted to add to any of this, please jump in.
Well, I was just going to say that I think your next slide shows a map that was gotten from the tax office, and that it was an actual physical map in a filing drawer. So depending on where you live, they do have maps from various years in that office. And also in that office, like Don said, and that's the only place I know where you can access it. You can't access it from your own computer at home. They have what are tax cards that had been digitized, and you can get owners' names and when properties changed hands. And sometimes they're a little difficult to read, but they can provide a lot of good information. And like I said, this physical map was in a filing drawer in that office. So.
Thank you. Don, just a moment ago, you said you prefer the insurance maps over the USGS. So tell us about Sanborn insurance maps. What are they and where do you find them and what do they tell you?
Yeah, the Sanborn maps, they were made for insurance purposes. So insurance companies can see where the properties are and what they are. They're color coded, not only like these ones are all yellow because all the buildings in this area are all made of wood, but there'll be other codes for brick or for metal or for stone, concrete buildings. So you can get a sense of that. And that's the purpose for them, was essentially to let fire insurance company knows what's happening. they usually will tell other information as well. They'll tell that a dwelling, or if it was a commercial enterprise, quite often it'll tell what businesses are occupying the building. It'll also tell you how many stories the building is, so you can get a sense of the scale of a neighborhood from it. And yeah, and what's major is that it shows you all the buildings. Sometimes they don't have outbuildings, but sometimes they do.
One thing that I noticed is a little tricky about the Sanborn maps is, for instance, the one on the right there, it says Sanborn Fire Insurance Map 1927 to 1950. And what they actually would do is have the map, and then when they would go back and survey it again, say the map's created in 1927 and they go back again in 1932 or whatever year, they actually would draw again the portions that had changed and glue it on top of the other map. So usually what you end up seeing here would be the latest year. And when you go and look at the actual physical map, they have these, for instance, in the state archives, you can see the places where new stuff was glued on top. And so some parts will be really thick where things have changed a lot, and that they would revise it and stick it on top of there. But at least that's what I found, is that generally when they have a span of years there, you're pretty much seeing what exists in the latest year.
Katie, you just mentioned the state archives. Tell us about the state archives.
The state archives, I mean, wonderfully, they've started to put a lot of things online. They've really been making a huge effort to scan things, and there's a lot of things available online, but they have all kinds of documents. They have photographs, and they have maps, and they have the old newspaper reels that we used to have to look at before newspapers.com came along on microfilm. They just have an extensive amount of information there. Like I said, they're trying to get more and more stuff online. So you can go to their website and click what kind of source of information you're looking for. Is it photographs or is it other things? And look through, and they've got it very well cataloged. But if you don't find sort of what you're looking for online, you can go in person as well and see if they might have more information. I know they probably have a lot of photographs that they haven't yet gotten to scanning and making available online, but you can go in and there's a big binder of the list of photographs, and it's arranged by topic. And it's also arranged by collection. So if somebody donated a whole series of photos, like a photographer like Nancy Bannock, who did a lot of photographs in the 1950s and 60s, they would keep all her photographs together. So you would need to look under hers and look through it. But most of their photographs are sort of in a general list of subjects. And so you might look in residential area and you might be able to narrow it down into your area. And then they'll have folders for different years and you can request to look at those. But really an extensive amount of information from at the state archives.
Paul, you started to comment, I think it was on the insurance maps, but maybe it's about the archives.
Oh, well, I could say a few things about both, but I just wanted to say just kind of a little piece of history. The Sanborn Map Company, just if anyone's interested, it was a national mapping, and it was the company was founded in 1867 by a man named D.A. Sanborn, and they were, the company created the handmade and colored maps of over 12,000 cities and towns across the United States. So it's not just Hawaii. I just thought that's kind of an interesting piece of information. But then about the state archives, I think their primary collection consists of government records from the monarchy. So it's a lot of stuff, not just, more recent history, but from the monarchy to the current legislative session. There's private collections of individuals and organizations there. Obviously, the historical photographs, maps, library collections, specializing in Hawaiian history, culture, and Pacific voyages. And they're, they have the old city directories. There's a lot of stuff there. So yeah.
Thank you.
And I'll just add that the people who work there are very, very knowledgeable. And it's always pays to ask them questions about what you're looking for, because they may have resources that you didn't think to look at.
Yeah, good point. The next kind of category of information is kind of zeroing in from the context and the location and more towards the site or the house itself. But architectural plans and drawings, you know, site plans, floor plans, maybe the original architectural drawings, maybe some amendments to or additions, and photographs. So where do you find these? Is it just you hope the homeowner held on to them, or is there a centralized location somewhere that people can look, or maybe a combination? Allison, we haven't heard from you yet, so.
If you're, I was going to say, well, if you're lucky enough to have the original drawings from, you know, a past owner, or if it's your family home, that's, you know, very, very fortuitous. If you don't have those, I'm trying to think where I would look for them, because they're not necessarily going to be, you know, available online. And if any of the other panelists too have stumbled upon good repositories for that, feel free to jump in.
Well, one place you might find them, and they wouldn't necessarily be the original drawings, but if there's been work done on the house, you can go to the building department and look up former permits that people have done. They only have drawing records, I think, from the 1970s, maybe to recent. They have permit information from prior to that, but I think they have the drawings only back through the 70s, but at least would you know, potentially provide you with a floor plan of the house. And it's possible that their drawings might include older drawings, and they've just sort of utilized that to show, say, existing plan and then new plan. And you might be able to see who worked on that, who was the architect, and maybe you could contact them to see if they had more information or had drawings.
Or so also sometimes I think like University of Hawaii also contains archives that have been donated to them. So you might also be able to check through their documents and see if potentially that's a resource that's available to you.
Especially if it was a well-known or prominent architect who works primarily in Hawaii. Sometimes the successor firms may have information. So like Architects Hawaii has 75 years of their records, right? And I know University of Hawaii has a Heigo Fuchino collection. This Historic Hawaii Foundation donated to them. So, you know, I believe there's an Osipov collection at University of Hawaii. So if it's tied to a specific architect, there may be some information from those firms or from those collections.
And this isn't necessarily the actual architectural plans, but sometimes at the tax office, you know, the prior image showed the, sometimes you can get the footprints and how it changed over time shown in drawings there. So I have found that a few times in the hard copy filing cabinets there, but it's completely hit or miss. It's kind of when you're desperate.
Okay, so that leads us to building permits, which were just mentioned. So maybe not necessarily the plans or the drawings, but information about what was being done, who did it, how much it cost, what time, you know, what period of time. So on this particular example, it shows there was a permit in 1939, but there were no original construction drawings. And then another permit that noted the construction cost of $7,193, which is amazing. And then another one in 1961 for the enlarged living room and an addition on the rear. And then another one in 1987 for a living room addition. So Angie, do you want to tell us about how you found some of these permit records and where they came from?
Sure, because they didn't come from planning or from the tax office. They actually came from the newspaper, because back then they had to, it was required that they posted construction information in the newspaper. And so that's why I have amounts and permit numbers and all of that. A lot more information actually is available if your home was built in that particular period. I would say from the 1920s through the 40s and maybe even into the 50s, because after that you don't find this kind of required posting for construction completion that you did during those years. But anyway, these came from the newspaper.
But now current permits are available through the Department of Planning and Permitting online. So one interesting thing here is the difference of information. The newspaper building permit noted a value of the dwelling and the value of the garage and servant quarters, but the newspaper information was slightly different. So what do you do when you have contradictions or inconsistencies between different sources? Do you just note it all and just make it clear, or do you try to fact check in some way? How do you approach that?
Well, I think obviously you try to fact check it and can work backwards if there's other ways to look at it and there's other pieces of information. But this stuff is kind of tricky. So when we come across something like that and it's so long ago, you usually can't figure it out. So we always make sure to note that we found two different pieces of information and make it clear that we're, not sure which one is accurate. I mean, in some cases, there's reasons why, sometimes if you're posting information or information about your project to the taxation office, you might put a lesser amount than you're talking about for some other reason. So who knows? I wouldn't know what happened or why it happened that way, but it's good to note it.
Prior documentation, this came up a lot, and looking at other studies, National Register nominations, other kinds of information that may have been found. So in this particular case, the owners were related to the Cook family, and there's a National Register nomination about a different Cook-owned property. So what do you find from National Register of Historic Places or State Register of Historic Places nominations, and where do you find them?
Well, to find the Hawaii Historic Register, one place you can look is the Historic Hawaii Foundation has a link on their page where you can go and you could select the island, and then you select the residential and non-residential, and it will show you a lot of the places that have been put onto the register, and often you can click on the link and it'll actually give you a downloadable version of that. I don't think maybe all of them are on there, so you could also check with the State Historic Preservation Division if you're looking for something in particular. National Register ones are downloaded from their website. You can download, it's actually will come out as an Excel file, and then there will be a link for each property that's on there that will then open up the website where you can download the National Register form. And these will, either of those documents will have a section of history about the property and potentially about any noted people, either the architect or the owner, if they had some sort of significance that attributes to significance for the house. So those will both be good sources of information. And again, I think it's really good to look at the sources they list, because this could lead you then to other documents that you might find more information on.
So this is getting more away from the architecture and more of the history, the people and who were they and why were they there and how did it come to pass and what did they do? And, so not so much, oh, it's the style of windows or the style of house or the style of building, but more about the living history of the place. So this description of Carolyn Cook Wren, this was the Wren guest house, right? So who were the Wrens and who she was and what her life was like, and then also her husband, who was he and what did he do? So Angie, where did you find some of this information?
I found a lot of this in newspapers again, and from the other National Register nomination. And one place that hasn't been mentioned online as a source, which people kind of look down on, is Wikipedia. But the thing about Wikipedia is, like I think Katie mentioned, and maybe pretty much everybody has, they cite their sources. And sometimes it's an exhaustive list of sources that can be invaluable. That's actually where I found the oral history piece of this. And I was able to find it online, but I didn't know about it until I saw it cited on Wikipedia. So I just wanted to note that. But yeah, this information, if you could see my notes, you would think I wasn't organized at all, came from a multitude of different sources. And it was very confusing because a lot of the people had the same names. So it became an effort in running lineage lines through my notes and calling people Carolyn 1, 2, and 3, that kind of thing. So it can be a lot of information, but if you just take your time and look at as many sources as you can find out a lot of interesting things. But anyway.
Does anyone else use the Center for Oral History or oral histories in general? Well, I'm disappointed. It seems like that might be a good source as well.
Another good source of information about people is Men of Hawaii, Men and Women of Hawaii. I usually always check there just to see if the owner of the house may have been, they're essentially subscription biographies where you pay a certain fee and then you have your biography posted in it. So quite a few people do that. And obviously also obituaries, which you can find very easily now through newspapers.com.
Just a little bit more on the tax records and the title history. We've talked about this several times throughout, but this one I thought was very interesting because of the different subdivisions and the different land titles, and some of the earlier owners kept the ownership and only later actually formally transferred it to the children. But the property was transferred for $1 in love from Charles Montague Cook Jr. and his wife to their daughter Carolyn and her husband. So looking at the Bureau of Conveyances and the Real Property Assessment Division, any notes on, I guess, hard copy versus digital, what you can do remotely versus where you have to actually go in and look physically through the books? Anything on title searches? Holly?
When I've gone to the Bureau of Conveyances, I've had a very difficult time doing title searches. So I was actually hoping to learn from Don Hibbard what his tips and tricks are, because I know he starts there. It's kind of difficult for me there, but Don, do you have?
Oh, yeah. Essentially at the Bureau, there's two, usually at the tax office in the field books that Angie was talking about earlier, they'll take back the title to a certain point, and they'll mention these people bought the property and the deed, the date of the deed, and they also have a book and page, or sometimes they call book lever, but write down that book and page, and you can go then to the Bureau of Conveyances, and they have all the books, and you can go to that book and to that page, and there the deed will be. And then when you read the deed, usually it's going to, if you're very fortunate, and most times I am, it'll say, we're selling this property to so-and-so, and I own this property because I bought it from so-and-so before. And then they'll list the book and page from when that person bought the property. So then you can go back to that book and to that page, and you'll get an earlier deed, and you can keep tracing it back. Sometimes you'll hit a dead end because of somebody will just, they'll just say, they won't say how they got the property, and you have to take it on trust. Quite usually they will have that in there. Another way you can also approach it, they have books which are called grantee and grantor indexes. And so if you know, oh, I'm pretty sure the house was bought in 1923 and this guy bought the house, you can go to the grant T index for that year, and it's all listed alphabetically. So you can then go find, oh, yep, sure enough, here it is. They bought the house. Here's who they bought it from. And they'll give you the book and page also that it's recorded. So you can go in that way. So that's essentially how I do it. And also the Bureau, besides, that's the regular system. There's also the land court system. Many people, rather than just record it in the regular system, will do it through land court, which guarantees your title because essentially the court awards you the property, and those, they're all listed by documents, and you have that document number. And again, when you go to that document, it'll tell how the person before got that property. So yeah, both ways work.
Thank you, John. I'm going to skip through this. We talked a lot about newspapers, so it's just thinking about this important source of, I guess it's called the first draft of history, right? And just a lot of information. But in addition to articles, what else do you look for in newspapers? Earlier, I think Angie mentioned permit notices. We mentioned obituaries. Are there, I don't know, advertisements? Are there, what else do you find in newspapers?
Yeah, so definitely those construction completion notices are really helpful. And then like advertisements for planned subdivisions, when people or companies are announcing how exciting their new subdivision is, that can be some great information. Classified ads, I've actually found from the 1980s, real estate section, the classified ads where they're selling a home that's a historic home and they had put a big photograph of the home. So I have a reference now from, say 1940, and I have a photograph in 1980. So I found those in the newspapers. But you got to make sure that you look in the later period, because a lot of time we get stuck looking in our historic period, but the more current period, sometimes you find that stuff. And then notices on deed transfers, articles written on the neighborhood's development, articles written on the home itself. Sometimes they would highlight specific architects. And so, yeah, those are the sources, and articles written on the architects themselves sometimes.
Yeah, and also sometimes you get rather interesting tidbits. I was just researching a house, and it mentioned, I was researching under the person's name, and said, oh, he's going to the mainland right now. And then around a month later, there's another one. He came back with a bride and he fooled all his friends. They didn't know why he was going. And so it's interesting little stories like that. And another one reported that the couple was coming home, but then they were delayed because the steamship they were on ran aground in San Francisco Bay. And it's nothing to do with the house per se, but it has something to do with their life. And it's also interesting little commentary about the perils of travel. And in that article, it was rather interesting. They talked about the fact that the steamship was leaving the bay and then it had to stop. And it mentions in the article that the crew thought this was bad luck, that this was a superstition. So it's something else you learn about the history and the time. And it was even more bad luck because the reason they stopped the boat was a clergyman had left his briefcase on the dock and someone was going to bring it to them. And they found out in that article that some crew members think clergymen on board ships are also bad luck. And so it's just small insights into the period, into the thinking.
Are there any, sorry, Katie, go ahead.
I was going to say, I was looking for information about an apartment complex, and I came upon sort of a notice that apartment complex was designed by the architect, but the architect had also done a number of other apartment complex designs with the same developer. So it's almost sort of an ad announcing this developer and this architect have done all these different other properties. And so it was just kind of interesting to see the things that they had designed together, and then that they had become sort of a prominent team at that time doing similar types of work.
And once you have the original owners' names, wedding announcements can be very informative. You'd be surprised how much information they put in. In this one in particular, they talked about how the Wren couple was having a house built for them. So, you know, you can't leave out the social part of the newspaper.
Yes, I would add to that, also think about different naming conventions. So she may have been Carolyn Cook, and then she got married and she became Carolyn Wren, or just Mrs. Herbert Wren, or Heaton Wren, sorry. So putting in multiple keywords, you know, because names change as well. Go ahead, Allison.
Sorry, I was also just going to add on I think Katie had mentioned the architects and developers and those connections for like other projects. Sometimes you'll also get the contractors, and it's kind of interesting to see from a very like tangible, like built standpoint, what other developments were being done around the island by the contractors at that point too.
You know, I know this is just one example out of many, but I hope it was helpful as we just walked through, you know, just this one house in this one neighborhood on this one street has such rich history and so many different sources. And of course, every place has a story to tell, and the information that brings all that together. So thank you all for sharing your information and just amazing experiences for all of this. So it's about 10:45 now. So what we're going to do now is give people the chance to move into smaller groups. And so we're going to have 5 breakout rooms. In each breakout room, we will have a room moderator, which will be a Historic Hawaii Foundation staff member. And then one or more of our experts will be there. For our moderators and room experts, you have to, hit join to the room you've been assigned to. For everybody else, it should auto-populate, and you should just be able to move directly into that room. We're going to have about half an hour in that room, and this is really your chance to ask your questions, to share your stories, to learn from each other, to talk about what you're working on or what might be helpful for you. And then when we finish that section, we'll come back and just do sort of a wrap up in the big group, but depending on how our time goes. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for spending this time with us and for being part of this discussion. I'm endlessly fascinated by the stories of these places and the people who shaped them and how they are what they are today. So it's really exciting to hear about what all of you are working on next. Just one other note, please be respectful to each other. I know this is a wonderful group of historic preservationists and people interested in history, and you're all going to be kind to each other, but just a reminder to behave yourselves. So with that, Andrea, why don't you go ahead? I'll stop sharing. And Andrea, if you want to go ahead and set up the breakout rooms, we'll just give everyone a chance to move into small groups. Sticking with us for the full 2 hours this morning. I hope everyone had a chance to talk story a bit in your rooms and have a chance to share with others, make some new friends, I hope, if you didn't already know everyone in there. We just really wanted, we weren't sure if we'd have enough time to do any kind of recaps or report out. I'm looking at the time and I don't think we're going to do that. But just as some follow-up items, we are going to put together a list of a lot of the resources we talked about, the URLs and some of the databases and how to find some of this. And we'll put that into a PDF and a list that will be both posted to this event website along with the PowerPoint and the reference materials. And then we'll email it out to everyone who registered for the event. So I realized I should have said that up front, so you didn't have to like be frantically trying to write down very long URLs. Apologize for not making that clear, but we will consolidate all of that into a handout and get that out to everyone. So that will be our follow-up. And then as you exit from the Zoom, you should get a pop-up window that asks you to do a post-event survey and evaluation. And we'd really appreciate it if you take time to do that. It's short, you know, it's just a few questions. But one of the things we'd like to know is if there's other kinds of training or information that you would find useful. And if so, you know, what is that? And that will help us as we design our programming, not just for this year, but in the out years as well. So if there are topics that you would find useful or things that you've just been curious about as far as history and preservation, please let us know that. So with that, I again just want to really thank our panelists and our other experts who came in to help, our Historic Hawaii staff members, Dr. Jackson Rotondo from National Park Service, and of course Mālama Mānoa for the financial support that made this all possible. So mahalo nui everybody. Thank you. So with that, enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
This was fabulous. Thanks, Kirsty.
Thank you.
Take care.
So much, everyone.